This is the Listening Books Podcast. I'm Jessica Stone, and periodically, instead of sharing an interview, I get to invite colleagues to round up some books based on a theme, and then I torture them with a literary game. This is one such episode with colleagues Amy and Claire, and the theme is Oldies and Newbies. Amy, you defined the parameters of this conversation for us and that category. So maybe you could explain how you're defining old and new, and then start us off with your choices.
Well, so we've each brought one new book and one old book to talk about. I didn't want to be too strict with the parameters, but it'll be interesting to see what we've all interpreted as old and new. But basically, I was thinking that new books are all going to be titles that have been published within maybe the last 5 years, probably like post-pandemic, really, just about. And old ones, I don't know, probably at least 50 years old. But maybe if we've got something that's 30 years old, that's fine. Just not very recent. So I'll discuss my newbie book first. And that book is Weirdo, which is by writer and stand-up comedian Sara Pascoe. And this was published at the end of 2023, and the paperback has only just come out recently. So it is pretty new. I follow Sara Pascoe on Instagram, and I've seen that she's been doing quite a lot of paperback promo recently. So it is still quite new and fresh, this book. So this book, Weirdo, which I believe, I might need to just double check this actually, but I think she narrates it as well, actually, which would make sense because she's a performer too. So this book is about Sophie, the main character, who's a woman in her early 30s living in Essex. And in her former job as a London tour guide, she meets a man called Chris, with whom she becomes completely obsessed, despite not really knowing him that well. And when he moves to Australia, she follows him there, even though she doesn't know him. And we kind of know that something happened when she was out there, probably something a bit embarrassing, but we're not quite sure what it is at first. But that's sort of it in the past. And then in the present of the book, she's back in London. She's in a huge amount of debt from going to Australia when she couldn't really afford it. And she's working in a pub. And then this guy, Chris, walks in with his friends, even though she hasn't seen him for ages and she assumed he was still in Australia. And that's kind of like the catalyst for the story. She just sees this guy that she used to be obsessed with walk into her workplace. So the main character, Sophie, is she's really delusional, and she's a liar, and she kind of lives in like a fantasy world all the time, but she's also very relatable. So I'm a little worried about you, Amy. Well, I've never followed someone to Australia because I fancy them, and I don't think many people have done that. But I think most people at some point in their lives have had a bit of a crush on someone, and you have a little fantasy version of them in your head and kind of what might happen with that person. And you don't really even though you don't really know them. And this is basically just an extreme version of that, kind of what everyone does at some point, So I think we can all sort of relate to having those sort of feelings for someone, even though we didn't go quite as far as she did.
Let's hope. Yeah.
That's pretty far.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know about you guys. Maybe you have gone halfway across the world to follow someone you don't know. But I think she's very socially awkward and very paranoid, and has a destructive inner monologue that gets in the way of her interactions with people, I think. And again, it's all kind of more extreme than maybe most people experience, but they are things that I can relate to as well. And I think these elements are usually used for comic effect, and it is very funny in places, but it's also quite dark as well. And you sort of see how her unhelpful thoughts and her neurotic nature kind of impact on her mental health as well, and her relationships with other people. And it's a very introspective book, and it is sort of like a stream of consciousness sometimes. And I feel like not a lot kind of plot wise really happens.
Those are some of my favorite books.
Yeah, definitely. I do like a book sometimes where it is sort of just, you are in the head of the main character, and that is sort of the narrative, really, is just, their stream of consciousness. But I did sort of feel like maybe I kind of wanted a bit more to be happening. I did find the character's voice was sort of engaging enough to carry this sort of this structure for the most part, but I did think sometimes maybe a little bit more narrative would have been good, and occasionally a break from being inside her head, because she's a very intense character. But saying that, she is a very interesting character because I would say she's not exactly an unreliable narrator, because I think she either lies or doesn't, kind of present things in quite the way they are, quite blatantly, or she kind of just says that she's lying, or it's really obvious or very easy to read between the lines. So I wouldn't say she's unreliable, but she's a very vulnerable narrator. So you kind of don't quite know what she's going to be doing next.
Ooh, an unpredictable narrator.
Unpredictable. Yeah. And I think because she's so on the edge and vulnerable and kind of emotionally quite raw, I think it makes sometimes listening to it quite painful in a way, not in an unsatisfying way. It's good really, but you sort of feel her pain and you're like, oh God, she is really weird. You do sort of feel
very
bad
cringy
for her, because sometimes, she comes across sometimes her interactions are completely bonkers, but then you sort of feel bad for her in a way because she didn't quite mean it to come out that way. And I think that's what I relate to sometimes as well. But I enjoyed the dynamic. She has quite a difficult relationship she has a current boyfriend, and her mum is in the story as well, and her sister, and she's got quite a difficult relationship with both of them. And it reminded me a little bit, just a dynamic with her mum and sister, of a TV series called Such Brave Girls, which has come out recently on iPlayer. So I think if you like that and the sort of dark comedy tone as well, you might like this. But yeah, overall, I did think it was an enjoyable book, and it was funny. But at times I did feel a little bit it was quite intense being inside this character's thoughts all of the time.
It sounds quite intense.
But yeah, no, I would recommend it. It's good.
Yeah, I'd read it on the basis of that description.
So I'll go ahead with my second choice, shall I?
Yeah, tell us what your oldie is.
My oldie is quite different. So my oldie is And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. So obviously, I'm guessing both of you guys read or listened to this one?
Ages ago. I don't remember the plot.
Right.
Well, it's fairly intense. You kind of picked two fairly intense topics.
Yeah, it is. And it's so it's a fairly difficult one to talk about really without giving any spoilers, because there's kind of twists all the way through the book. But I guess, so I won't spoil anything for anyone listening, or for you, Jess, because you might want to read it again and then be surprised the second time. I like that when that happens. I quite often completely forget the plots of films and books that I've seen or read, and then you can just enjoy it a second time. So the story revolves around a gathering of 10 people who have all been invited by a mysterious stranger to spend a couple of days in a remote house on an island in the UK. And then we find out that each of the 10 people has been involved in some kind of crime, and somebody is seeking justice. And I think this is an interesting one of Agatha Christie's, as most of her books, like the Poirots and Miss Marples, they're sort of considered cozy crime. I've not read many of them. I've read a couple of Poirots, but I know that they're cozy crime books really. But this one definitely isn't cozy. No, I don't know what you think, Claire.
No, it's definitely not cozy. I've read other Marples and Poirots, and I find this one quite different. It's a bit of a departure, not necessarily for Agatha Christie, but it was a departure for me, kind of experiencing the story.
Yeah.
But really, really cleverly done. It's very enjoyable.
Yeah, and I think tonally, I guess it must be quite it's a bit more sinister than the others, I think. And this isn't my observation, but I remember reading somewhere that this book is more unsettling because you don't have a familiar detective, likable figure like Poirot or Miss Marple leading you through the mystery. You're just there on your own with these characters.
That's a good observation, actually. I never thought about the role, that part of the role that they play.
Yes, exactly. It's not just sort of the main character. They're sort of there for you as well to kind of guide you through the story. And you do feel you're very familiar with Poirot and Miss Marple, and they're kind of quite cozy characters in their own way. So they do sort of make it seem a little bit less intense maybe than, I mean, most of the time they are kind of investigating a murder, aren't they? So, it's not exactly cheery subject matter, but it's still considered cozy. But this one does feel quite chilling, partly because I think it's on an island and you do really get that sense of feeling secluded and cut off and unsafe. And because there's a lot of characters as well, you sort of feel and there's no narrator, you kind of feel like you're included in the group which is sort of a bit more unnerving as the book goes on. And particularly listening to the audiobook as well, you've got this going on in your ears. You do just sort of feel like you're part of the conversation sometimes. I forgot to say who narrates this version. I listened to the version narrated by Dan Stevens. So he was very good at doing all the different voices, because obviously like it's important to be able to tell who's talking anyway in any audiobook, but particularly in this one where like it's so sort of important to know who's saying what and when. He sort of has a really good distinction between all of the voices. So yeah, it was published in 1939, and with the whole oldie and newbie theme, I was thinking about whether if you wrote it now or something similar now, would it work? And apparently it's the world's best-selling mystery novel, so there must be something quite timeless about it. And I think really like the narrative is quite simple in a way, and I think that is probably quite appealing. Obviously very like intricately written and difficult to write, but yeah, I think if it was written now, it would be quite hard to create that same feeling of seclusion, as anyone can contact anybody at any time now. Like you can't really ever be that cut off. And I think you'd have to have some sort of plot device in there somewhere where they weren't allowed their phones on the island or something, or there was no signal on the island. They were in some sort of weird like 5G black hole. So yeah, it would be difficult to do now, but I mean, as long as you got over that technology issue, I think the narrative is quite timeless. Yeah.
I think that's a really common challenge, I think, for a lot of different genres and the tropes that they use. I remember reading a book that was published, I wanted to say about a decade ago, and then I looked it up and it was actually 15 years ago because that's just how time flies. But it was a novel that was a modern attempt at a Gothic novel. And you can't really do that with modern technology. And I just remember noticing how they basically kind of had to just ignore it or write it out of existence, kind of to make it work, to get you that feeling that you needed. So I think it is quite a common challenge. I did want to do a sort of, if you like this, then you might also like kind of recommendation for fans of Agatha Christie, and there are a lot of them, judging by her book sales. If you would like something more contemporary, but still has a lot of what I think of when I think of Agatha Christie mysteries. You might enjoy the Canary Club mysteries by Louise Hare. I recently encountered them because I was interviewing the author for the podcast. But in preparation for that interview, I was reading one of those books. It was actually the second in the series, Harlem After Midnight. But the sound of the first book I also found really appealing. And the thing that I like about them, and I do think they kind of fall into the cozy mystery kind of genre, they're also historical fiction, and they're glamorous. Like it's like, give me cozy mystery, but make it fashionable, make it stylish. You know?
Today I'm serving a cozy mystery.
Exactly.
Cozy mystery with it.
Yeah, like you just got like jazz clubs, and you can picture the gorgeous costumes, and it's got style. You know, I enjoyed the writing as well. So I do recommend those. I don't think we have them in the collection, in the listening books collection yet, but we will soon. So be on the lookout for those.
They sound like books I would like.
I was thinking that you might like them, Claire. Yeah, I think you should give them a go. Claire, it is your turn. Yes. Which old and newbies have you chosen?
Okay, so for anyone who's read my Friday Favourites on Facebook, you'll know I don't read many new books. So
stick with what you like.
Stick with what I like. Yeah.
Judge a book by its cover.
I was trying to pick a book to review. It was quite a challenge because I was looking back at what I've read, and I've realised a lot of them are for 10 or 15 years old. But anyway, so my new book, it is pretty recent, I think. So I basically chose it because I like Greek mythology, and the book cover is really lovely. So the book I've chosen is Psyche and Eros by Luna McNamara. And it's based on the mythical love story between mortal Psyche and the god Eros. And it basically details how they are ripped apart by a curse that's inflicted by the goddess Aphrodite. In some ways, it wasn't what I was expecting. The book is very much an interpretation of the myth. It's quite different.
Were you familiar with the myth before you started reading it?
Only very slightly. So for me, it didn't kind of impact too much on my enjoyment of the book. But it has made me kind of go look and read more about the myth around it. And she is quite different. So in this book, she's kind of depicted as more of a hero. She wants to be like a legendary hero like Hercules or one of those kind of Greek male heroes. Whereas I think in the original kind of myth, she's more of a gentle, fair maiden that, she's more expected to be a wife and a mother and a princess and that kind of thing. And in this, I suppose it's a bit more of a modern take on it. So she's a bit hard and not that likable to start with.
Oh.
She's quite selfish, but as I kind of read more, I think that's because at the beginning she's more of a child. She's a teenager. She's a bit more single-minded about what she wants from life, and as she kind of goes through, she grows up a bit and then becomes a bit more softer and a bit more understanding of herself. So she gets more likable as she goes along for me. But basically, Eros, or Cupid as she calls him, is sent to curse her as she's offended Aphrodite and accidentally curses himself and falls in love with her instead. So the story follows along with this kind of impact of the curse and how it affects them. So each chapter is dedicated to either Psyche or Eros, which I really liked. So it's telling each part of that tale from their point of view.
Were there two different narrators or just one?
In this version, yeah, there's two different narrators for each, for Psyche and Eros. But then also lots of other gods or popular Greek characters appear. So Helen of Troy's in there, and there's the whole thing about they're going to war with Troy, which, yeah, I'm not sure that this particular myth mixes with all of the other myths, but it does in this book.
Okay, yeah. What do they call that when there's like is it like a crossover episode or something?
Yeah. But it does make it, it's a fun adventure as much as a love story and kind of them getting to know each other and them being ripped apart, which is enjoyable.
They're getting ripped apart is enjoyable.
No. It's a love story.
Okay. Now also worried about Claire.
But yeah, there's a lot of morality messaging, as in most myths. So there's lots of themes of pride and loyalty and greed and vanity, and gods, appear very much how you expect them to be. They're quite selfish. So yeah, so it works really well, even though the characters are depicted slightly differently than how I vaguely remember the myth being. So yeah, so for a new read, it was a pretty good start.
I love that even your new read is a really old story.
Yeah. You've managed to find the oldest new book.
Yeah.
The oldest new book
you possibly could.
Geez, if you went all the way back to the myths for your new read, I hesitate to ask what your old read is.
It's a cave drawing.
So I'm a bit more recent. I'm Jane Austen this time.
Okay.
It's only a few hundred years. So I've picked Persuasion, which I think is the more romantic of her books. More so than Pride and Prejudice, which tends to be the one people think of when you think of a love story. So it was published in 1817. So it was after Austen died, and I think it demonstrates her more mature outlook on love. And it's about Anne Elliot, who's persuaded to give up Frederick Wentworth when she is about 18, 19, and she loves him and he loves her, but he doesn't have any rank or money. So both of those things are really prized by her family, particularly her godmother. So Anne is very young and guided by her godmother a great deal. So again, ripped apart. There's an unfortunate theme happening here. But then the main focus of the book is when we're reintroduced to them about 10 years later, when Anne's family are forced to rent out their house and Frederick's sister and brother-in-law settle there. So they're thrown together again. And the novel kind of follows them rekindling or rediscovering their love for each other, which had kind of always been there. It never really gone away. So I think this is my favorite Austen novel because it's about love that's based on more than social standing, money, looks. It's, it stood the test of time, and it's deeper and more lasting because of it. So although the reader knows that they love each other, we share Anne's thoughts and her regrets and her hopes throughout the story. It's a lovely sense of first love as well.
Yeah.
Because she's more mature, she's more sure of herself, but she's still like this completely unselfish, caring character who puts other people first. So they're kind of getting to know each other as adults and they're developing appreciation for them as new, older people.
Yeah.
Which means the ending is just that much more enjoyable, I think.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what the ending is because you probably know what the ending is.
The ending is lovely. I will say, like, although Anne, I think, is one of the better Jane Austen heroines, I found myself kind of frustrated with Captain Wentworth as a character. I felt like, and maybe it's actually because Austen is so focused on Anne Elliot and her interior life. I feel like Captain Wentworth is kind of a blank through most of the novel.
He is, but then a lot of her male characters are a bit of a blank.
Yeah, I suppose so. He's only given something to do really kind of at the end that would kind of impress you as I don't know.
Not impress the rest of the time.
That's that kind of device that some authors use where like you make a character a bit of a blank slate and then the reader can put onto them
to project.
Yeah. So if like you have lots of ladies reading the book in the past, they could like kind of, and
they're just picturing their perfect man.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know. Maybe she didn't have that in mind when she wrote it, but yeah, that could be a reason why he's a bit blank. But yeah, maybe she's just focusing on the women.
Yeah, I'd like to think that she's just kind of less interested in the men by this point in her writing career, because this is one of her last novels, I think.
Yeah, it was.
It might be the last, was it?
I think it is one of the last. Yeah, I love it. I think it's a lovely book.
Yeah,
I enjoy Pride and Prejudice, but I think for a true romantic story, Persuasion kind of wins out on that.
Yeah.
So new-ish, oldish books.
Well, for my own picks, they do have a little bit in common with some of your picks. My oldie, which I guess I'll start with, was also published in 1939, like Amy's. And then there were none. Very different kind of book. And I guess maybe I should apologize for bringing two books that I really don't think qualify as light summer reading. So maybe just if you're interested in these books, but not right now, like it's not exactly beach reading. Maybe just save them for the autumn. Yeah, so The Grapes of Wrath is my pick for my oldie. It won the Pulitzer in 1940. And I was a little hesitant to pick this to talk about, mainly because it's such a talked about book. I just sort of think, what do I have really to add to the conversation? Have either of you read the book?
I haven't, no.
No?
I read it at university and I really, really liked it. It's one of those books where I liked it a lot more than I thought I would.
Yeah.
Because I had to read it for my course, and it was one of those ones where I was just at first I was like, ugh, boring. But then like I read it and it was really good. But again, as you were saying earlier about And Then There Were None, I don't really remember very much about it. So yeah.
Well, it basically follows this family, the Jodes, during the Dust Bowl, when a series of droughts basically ruined a lot of farmers in the plains area, and specifically Oklahoma for the purposes of this story. And a lot of them were from Oklahoma. They were given the derogatory term Okies as they were migrating to California. And they were migrating to California because they were promised all of these well-paying jobs that, California wasn't experiencing drought. It was lush and growing, and they needed more people to pick the fruit. And so they would send out all these ads basically saying, oh, we need loads of healthy workers to come pick the fruit, come and we'll pay you well and everything. And so they make this migration to what is like, it is literally the promised land for them. That phrase is used in the book as well. And when they get there, it just turns out that yes, it is a land of abundance, but that abundance is not going to be shared with them, that they are just going to be exploited at every turn. And, you know, Steinbeck is angry about this. He's angry about the way they're being treated, and he wants you, the reader, to be angry about it too. Like there's no subtlety here. Like he is trying to get you on side. He wants you to understand the plight of these people, and he wants you to appreciate the dignity of these people as well. And so it's a great story just on a story level, but also he interrupts the actual kind of plot with these chapters that have this gathering force in them. You know, he kind of zooms out from this particular family, and he'll sort of describe what's happening with the land, and he'll give you an overview of what's happening with basically the banks, who are the ones who control the Farmers Association, who are the ones making these decisions. And like one of these decisions is to let all of this abundant fruit that has come into season. There's so much the way he describes all the fruit that has come into season, the lush abundance of it, and then they let it rot in order to drive prices up, and they won't let these literally starving migrants, they won't let them pick the fruit, they won't pay them to pick the fruit, and they won't even let them eat the fruit that is rotting on the ground. Like they'll spray it with kerosene so they can't eat it. They'll throw the potatoes in the river and then like have guards hold people back from fishing them out of the river. Like it is such appalling mistreatment of humankind, and all for profit. It is all so the banks will have greater profit. Again, this is not a light read, but you can, I think, appreciate it at different levels and in different ways. Lots of ways to enjoy this book. Steinbeck himself said there are 5 layers in this book. A reader will find as many as he can, and he won't find more than he has in himself. Well then.
It sounds really interesting. I didn't read any of Steinbeck books when I was at school, so.
Well, we are particular fans of it in my house because it features in how my husband and I met. So the very first time we met, he was telling me about his experience of reading The Grapes of Wrath as he was ascending Aconcagua, which is the highest point in the Americas. And the way that he talked about how his experience going up the mountain, like the dust of the mountain kind of merged with the dust of the road that the Jodes are traveling, and his deep empathy for them, how moved he was by it, that when he got to the top, he actually left the book at the summit as a gesture to what he thought must be the greatest American writer, to leave it at the highest point of the Americas. And I love the story because I'm sure he expected me to be impressed that he climbed Aconcagua, which is impressive.
I was going to say, there's a lot of bragging going on in the story from him, Jess.
Exactly. But yeah, it was
and also littering.
And littering, I know, right? Yeah. What a litter bug. So yeah, we love the book, and I do recommend it. Also, I will say that there's more humor in it than I remembered. That's like the humor is not the thing that stands out, is not the thing that you take with you necessarily.
That's what I was going to say. Like, I don't remember there being too many chuckles in it, but I guess it's subtle.
Yeah. Well, the reason why I noticed it was because I was actually going to make this a point of contrast with my newbie pick, which is also a Pulitzer Prize winner. I thought since I chose the Pulitzer Prize winner from 1940, I would choose the Pulitzer Prize winner from last year, which actually there were 2 from last year.
Oh.
Because so there's my pick, which is Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. And then there's Trust by Hernan Diaz, which I also really liked, but I didn't choose to talk about for this conversation because I just found there were I felt like Demon Copperhead had more to say in conjunction with the Grapes of Wrath. You know, they kind of talk to each other. They're in a similar category. And I was going to say that Demon Copperhead has a lot more humor in it. And it's true. I think it does. But I kind of didn't realize that there was more humor in the book than I remembered in The Grapes of Wrath. But I still think Demon Copperhead has more humor in it. And that's down to the voice of it, because it's a first-person narrator and he has loads of personality. So let me back up a bit for anybody who hasn't. Actually, have either of you read Demon Copperhead?
No.
Do you know anything about it? Have you?
I don't.
Amy says as she starts looking it up.
I'm looking at your notes.
I recognise the name. I feel like it was in the Members' Choice Award list last year.
I think it was.
It may well have been. Yeah, I think it was really popular. Barbara Kingsolver is one of these authors that I will read whatever she puts out. I did not immediately realize that it is, of course, a retelling of David Copperfield. So...
Oh, really?
Yes. So this is what I was saying before, Claire, about how my new book is actually a retelling of a much older story, but it is very much in a modern setting. It's David Copperfield, but set in southern Appalachia in the opioid epidemic, and Demon Copperhead is the nickname of the main character, partly because of his red hair. So, like Steinbeck with The Grapes of Wrath, Barbara Kingsolver is angry about what has happened to these people and how they have been taken advantage of and how they have been forgotten and how they have been treated with contempt. And she wants you, the reader, to feel that way as well. And again, there's no subtlety about that. Like she has an intention and it is there. And I think it works. And, you know, she's like Steinbeck in that, but she's also like Dickens in that. Like she is explicitly advocating for people who have been wronged. But because you've got this really charming narrator who, you know, he talks in a Southern Appalachian way. And by the way, I'm using that pronunciation of Appalachia advisedly. That is how people from that area would say it. And so that's how I say it as well.
Where is Appalachia?
Oh, it covers it covers a number of states. I think the part that she was talking about for Demon Copperhead is actually in Virginia, which may be where she is now. I think Barbara Kingsolver is from Kentucky, and part of that is also part of the Appalachians. Where I'm from is not too far from the Appalachians. I'm from the foothills of the Blue Ridge Mountains, which are kind of part of the greater Appalachian range. I mean, it's a big range. It covers a lot of a lot of territory, and it's very old. It's a very old mountain range as well. So you've got Demon Copperhead, who is the first person narrator, and he has such a great and charming way of speaking. I think it really gets you on side, and also he has really funny ways of putting things. So there is that, and I really appreciate that humor because the subject matter is actually really pretty grim. But I think the humor that's in there is a great leavening agent for that. Yeah, I really loved it. Highly recommend.
I think we've all picked slightly different books. Like you've gone quite heavy.
Yeah.
Mine are quite romance based. Amy's, I suppose, both of yours are quite different.
Yeah. I would say none of us have really picked a light read, really.
Yeah.
Like even the romance, I'm not sure. I don't know if Persuasion is exactly a beach read. For some people, maybe.
I was talking to a friend recently who also is a big reader, and he says he does not do light summer reading.
I think I do actually have a bit of a memory of going on holiday when I was at university and taking The Grapes of Wrath with me because
really
it was like I had to read it over the holidays. And I was in somewhere like Greece or Tenerife, and I was trying to read The Grapes of Wrath. on the sun lounger, and it wasn't really working.
no.
I mean, the heat was maybe sort of like quite, mirroring the dusty heat of the story. But
You're like, I'm trying to be mad, but I'm in like literal paradise here.
yeah, exactly. But yeah, I think we've got a good range of books there between us. I think we've chosen well.
I hope. Well, I
complemented each other in a way as well. But now I'm excited for the game.
Yes, the game. It is time for the game. I decided to base the game on the actual books the books and authors that the three of us chose for today. So we'll see how well you actually know the books that and authors that you chose.
Oh no.
Swear. We're all outed as frauds.
Okay, even though I don't think we actually have a lag time, I'm still going to, rather than have you sort of buzz in, I am going to give you each a question and alternate, because I thought it was a kindness to ask you about your own books and authors that you've chosen.
Okay.
I'd ask me about the Agatha Christie. I think that might be.
Yeah.
Well, if Amy doesn't get it right, it'll go over to you. But the last, so the first two rounds are based on your own choices, and then the last round are based on mine. So.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. Interesting.
Okay, so the first question is over to Amy. I do have multiple options, but you may know the answer right away. The question is, before her comedy career, Sara Pascoe worked as a what in London? Would you like the options?
Yeah, I think I know, but yeah, go on.
Okay. Is it A, tour guide, B, taxi driver, C, waitress, or D, bartender?
Wow. I guess she probably could have been a waitress or a bartender, but I'm pretty sure I remember her talking about being a tour guide.
Yes, that is correct. She was a tour guide.
Hey.
I figured you'd get that one right. Okay, Claire. This is not a multiple choice question. And the answer to this clue...
You'll start crying.
The answer to this clue will rhyme. Okay? So tell me, what's another way of saying dumb Eros?
Dumb Eros.
It is also the name of a song.
No, you stumped me. And it'll be probably an answer I'll go, oh no, I should have known that.
No, you definitely know this. Like, first of all, I'm going to walk you through this. First of all, what's the... No, I should give Amy a chance first. Hang on. Amy, do you know it?
Another way of saying dumb Eros.
Mm-hmm.
Cupid.
Yeah? And it needs to rhyme.
Stupid Cupid.
Yes!
We kind of both got that. I don't think I would have thought of that if she hadn't have said Cupid. So what are you going to do, Jess?
I don't know how to score that.
I feel like Amy should get it because she did say the actual answer.
Oh, Claire.
Oh,
That's so nice of you. Edward would never have done that. He would have clawed back any chance of a point whatsoever. He would have had his hands on it.
Right. I'm going to give you 1.5 points, Amy.
Okay.
Oh, I get a half a point.
Woo-hoo. Yes, you're getting half a point. All right. Back over to Amy. Agatha Christie's The Mousetrap is the longest running play in the world by far. It opened in the West End in 1952 and ran continuously until what year? And why did it stop production?
Did you say 1952?
Mm-hmm.
That it started.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I know the answer to this.
You do know the answer to this.
Yeah. I'm going to be so annoyed when you say, because I can't bring
Claire,
that
have you got it yet?
Somebody, no. No, someone in it. Someone died?
Possibly.
I mean, someone could have done. The theatre closed that it was in.
Claire, do you have an idea?
I
What
have
year?
known the answer, but I can't think of what it is right this second. I feel like
Right, you two.
flood
Think
or
about
something.
think about what in recent history would have shut something like that down.
COVID.
Yes.
Oh my God.
So obvious.
And so what year would that have been?
2020?
20.
Yes.
Yeah, 2020.
Okay, so all right, another half point to each of you then. Oh my goodness.
Oh my God. Well, I was just unintentionally sticking with the topic of oldies in my head because I could only think of like events from ages ago that were before 1952. And I was like, the war? No. The Great Fire of London? That didn't happen after 1952. Yeah. Well, the pandemic's just been wiped from our minds, hasn't it? So
yeah, it's just a black hole, really. Yeah.
Okay. Half point each, though. That's fair.
Yeah. So the score now stands at Amy with 2 points and Claire with 1 point. Okay, Claire, over to you. Persuasion was published after Jane Austen's death, but that's not the title she gave it. What was her working title for Persuasion? And I have four possibilities for you.
Yeah, give me the possibilities.
So it is multiple choice. Okay.
Yeah.
A, Anne. B, Captain Wentworth. C, The Letter. Or D, The Elliots. You cannot possibly be expected to know this. So again, like this is just like take your best.
I'm torn between A and D.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to go with D.
That is correct.
Yay!
It is the Elliots. Yay!
Good guess.
We're done with those half points now. We're taking the whole lot. Okay, Amy. The timing and success of The Grapes of Wrath unfortunately meant the cancellation of another book on the same subject written by Sonora Babb, a writer who spent a lot of time working with the migrant farmers in the tent camps in California and whose notes Steinbeck apparently had access to. The title of her book, which was eventually published in 2004, comes from the legal notices a company town would send residents they were evicting. So based on that clue that it comes from the legal notices a company town would send residents they were evicting,
okay,
what
I'm glad
do
you said that
think?
Again. Thank you.
Because the question wasn't long enough.
Yeah.
What do you think the title could be? And of course, I have choices for you. A, Dear John. B, To Whom It May Concern. C, Whose Names Are Unknown. Or D, Greetings.
To Whom It May Concern.
Final answer?
Yes.
Claire.
Oh, no. I didn't get it right.
C?
No.
Whose names are unknown?
Yeah, that is correct.
Oh.
And like, I know that was, again, this is one of these, you could not possibly be expected to know this, but I thought it was so interesting when I learned about this. And I'm glad that the book eventually got published. But basically, these legal notices that would be sent to the residents of a company town, it would say something like, to John and Jane Doe, whose true names are unknown. And then it would have like the eviction notices. Like they didn't even bother to find out who they were. They were just like, get out, you know? Let's see. Claire got that one. So, Claire's in the lead now.
What?
Okay, Claire. Barbara Kingsolver not only won the Pulitzer Prize for Fiction for Demon Copperhead, she also won the Women's Prize for Fiction, making her the first to win it twice. For which novel did she win it the first time? Back in 2010, when it was still called the Orange Prize for Fiction. And I do have some choices for you.
Oh, I'm going to need the choices.
Yeah.
I'm afraid.
Again, not something you would be expected to know. So A, The Bean Trees. B, Wolf Hall. C, The Poisonwood Bible. Or D, The Lacuna.
Okay, so it definitely wasn't B.
Right. Tell us why it definitely wasn't B.
Because that's that's the other
Someone
lady.
Yeah.
Margaret Atwood, isn't it?
Hilary Mantel. But
Hilary
yes.
Mantel. See, I can't even. What was C?
C is the Poisonwood Bible.
I'm going to go with that one, the Poisonwood Bible.
Okay, that's a great guess. It is not the Poisonwood Bible, I'm sorry to say. So, Amy, it's like a 50-50 for you because we've already eliminated B and C. So it's either A, the bean trees, or D, the lacuna. What do you reckon?
The lacuna.
It is the lacuna.
Yeah.
Oh, well done.
I definitely knew that. I wasn't guessing.
This is the reason I sneaked Wolf Hall in there, even though that's not even by Barbara Kingsolver, is because they were contenders that same year. And I'd forgotten that the lacuna actually beat out Wolf Hall for the prize, which I find kind of surprising. Even though I enjoyed the lacuna, I liked it a lot, but I feel like Wolf Hall has had so much more has left so much more of a mark on the kind of cultural public imagination. I feel like the lacuna hasn't made that mark really.
Well, I must say I hadn't heard of it, so sorry, Barbara.
Okay, so that means this is the worst outcome. It is a tie. It's a tie.
Oh. Would you say it's a draw then?
It's a draw this time round.
You're going to share the crown.
Yeah.
Now see, this is the kind of like collaboration we just didn't get with Edward.
Yeah, this is more harmonious. We're happy to share the glory, mainly because there is no literal prize. I think if there was, we'd be a bit more
of a fight for it, I think.
Fighty, yeah.
I hope Edward's listening now.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us. I hope you were able to play along. We'd love to hear what you're reading these days, old or new. You can find us on most social media platforms. We're at Listening Books. We are back to a monthly schedule for the podcast now. So next month, I'll be sharing an interview with the delightful Sierra Godfrey, author of A Very Typical Family, which might make for more ideal summer reading than, say, The Grapes of Wrath. It is available in the Listening Books collection if you'd like to get a head start before that conversation. This podcast is produced by Listening Books, a UK charity that provides an audiobook lending service reaching over 100,000 people with print impairments. It's simple to join. For more information, head to our website, www.listening-books.org.uk.